is what I think I've learned. I've learned that we all have many interests. Some of you love fishing. I was looking in the past weeks when I go past Bangs Lake or Diamond Lake, all the little shanties that have been out there, or for the really weird souls that just take a bucket and sit out in the wind for 4 hours and out on the ice. If I like fishing, and those of you that know me, I'm not a biggest fan of fishing. I don't know that I'd love it enough to sit on a bucket out on a frozen lake. Some of you are already talking about fishing plans for the summer. Others of you have other interests, toy trains, baseball cards, gardening. Some of you have already talked about seeds and what new things you're going to plant. Cooking, French colonial furniture. I don't even know if that's a thing. It just sounds good. When people get in the way of our things, often we get uneasy because we love our things. Here's the issue. I think the thing which determines our influence and effectiveness are not any of the things I mentioned, but rather the people with whom we share life. Our relationships are everything. We're commanded not only to love God, we're commanded to love our neighbor. And yet still we find the world of relationships very difficult to navigate, all of us. And that's because relationships are hard. And they're hard because we have relationships with other people. Or should we say it's hard because other people are forced to have relationships with us? But you know what else is hard? Lack of relationships. A life kind of bereft of closeness. We need to navigate this world better. I've probably chosen to try to harvest more grain than I can do in a Sunday, but let me try to get through some things. That should say 1 Peter 4, 8 through 10. This is our passage for the day. Here's what it says. Above all, love each other deeply, because love covers a multitude of sins. That's not the only time in the Bible that phrase is used. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. I want to talk about just a couple areas of relationships that we find it sometimes difficult to navigate that are important. The first one is friends. We have difficulty sometimes with friends. I think some of us are blessed with a few friends. Others are blessed with a lot of friends. I hope none of us have this thing called ex-friends. Here's some things to help us navigate this world of friendship. First one is this. One of the most important qualities we can bring to any relationship is joy, is happiness. Happiness improves all your relationships. People just like being around happy people. People like talking in close proximity to people with good breath. Bad breath is a hindrance to close conversations. I don't need to tell you that. I've learned that. As bad as that might be, is trying to be in a relationship with someone who's perpetually negative all the time. Happier people give more to others. Happier people have more influence in the lives of others. Happiness enhances productivity. You know, they've actually done tests and studies to show that's true. We produce more in a positive mood than a negative mood. Happiness promotes better health behaviors. Happier people are healthier. Happier people engage in more exercise. Happy people means you're sick less. Your antibodies work better when you're joyful than when you're not. Happier people more resistant to colds and flus. Their wounds heal faster. I'm not making this up. And happier people live longer. Now, I know some of you are going, you don't know my Uncle Joe. He was the nastiest old man you've ever read, and he lived to 98. He was the exception. Happiness reduces heart attacks and strokes. And I know there's somebody out there now that's thinking, Well, it's not hard to be happy. Sometimes I don't feel like being happy. How dare you sit there and tell people it's wrong to be sad? I didn't say any of that. Not a line. There's a lot of things. Sometimes you don't feel like when you're a parent. Remember when you had the flu and both kids had the flu? You didn't feel like taking care of the kids, but you did anyway. There are situations in life, it might be easier to get angry, but you held it under control anyway. There's places in life where you needed to be brave and you didn't want to be brave, but you were brave anyway. There are times in life, even when we don't feel like it, we act more joyful. Why? Because it's better for the people around us. Secondarily, you've heard the phrase, fake it till you make it. Sometimes if you don't feel particularly happy and you act happy, the emotions will follow. In the world of friends, I think it's important to remember it's not always just about you. That's easy to forget. We have this new idea that's around now more than it's been in a while, and it's this. Whoever or whatever doesn't agree with where I'm going right now, I'm going to remove that negative influence from my life. That is a terrible idea. First of all, the person might have a little bit of wisdom. Second of all, you might need people around you later. Part of life is learning to navigate people that don't always see things the way we do. And with everything, conversations are a must. Talk all the time. Explain yourself. Tell people you love them when you're disagreeing with them. Tell them you love them when there's tension in the room. Oh, it's hard to have conversations. It's hard to have unpleasant conversations. It's also hard to live a life with nothing but strained relationships with the people around you. Choose your hard, because both are. The second thing, and I know this is quick, I want to talk about our job as parents. And I was thinking about parents, and I'm trying to get we were at the 90s with the first one. We've jumped back to the 70s here. So maybe trying to have happy days as parents. Is that a hint? Who's up there? There's nothing more important we'll do in life than the job we do as mom and dad, or as aunt and uncle, or as grandma and grandpa, or as interested neighbor to the kids around us. Here, I did a lot of look this week. Here's all the broad intersection of studies of what makes a particularly effective parent and grandparent and aunt and uncle and all those things. First, good, vibrant parents tend to have healthy relationships with each other. Children in high conflict families, whether intact or divorced, tend to fare worse in life than children of parents who get along. I know I'm back to happy again. There's something they call emotional contagion. It's a psychological phenomenon where people catch feelings from one another. If your friend is happy, if your parent is happy, you tend to be a little happier. That brightness will infect you. If you are negative, harsh, judgmental, continually, that infects a child too. The other thing a parent does, a particularly effective parent, is they teach grit. I just like that phrase. There is a psychologist named Angela Duckworth. She won something called a Genius Grant for uncovering this powerful trait that they later called grit. It's defined as a tendency to sustain interest and sustain effort toward very long-term goals. That quality was the strongest correlation with grade point average, retention in like West Point and the service academies, and how well you finish in the spelling bee. That might have been my problem. I won my schools in 7th and 8th grade, but I failed at the next level. I don't know. It's about maybe if the expectation of attainment, the expectation of finishing what you start, the expectation, this class might not be your thing, and I know Little League might not be your thing, but what you can do is finish the season and find something you love. Find a relationship in there. Don't allow quitting. Good parents also tend to apply behavioral control, not psychological control. This is a very significant role in the satisfaction and well-being of kids who later become adults. I think we know what psychological control is. I think we know people who operate out of guilt, operate out of shame, operate out of a heavy-handed judgmentalism. On the flip side, those people who parented that way, children exhibited lower well-being. In fact, the same level as people who maybe had just lost a friend or relative with death. That's how much impact that kind of heaviness had. Oh, one last thing. You've heard me say this before, and I think this is very important. Good parents allow their children to fail. Someone called one of the new trends that's out there today, they call it snowplow parenting, or micromanaging every detail of a child's life so they never encounter failure. In fact, it was seen that a huge number, something like 50% of parents today still plan or make appointments and plan the lives for their 20 to 29-year-old children. Make doctor's appointments, follow-ups, all these things. I didn't like that when I was 15. Here it is. I'm sorry, I missed it. I did write it down. It's New York Times. 75% of parents of adults aged 19 to 29 still book their children's doctor's appointments and haircuts for them. Haircuts. Now, some of us are snickering because you've seen pictures of us in the 70s and no one got a haircut. And I understand why that happened. Here's a phrase. I love this one. This kind of snowplow parenting is the exact opposite of good parenting. We live in a world where everybody is trying to prepare the road for little Johnny instead of preparing little Johnny for the road. And if your name's John, I apologize. I'm not trying to pick on anybody here whose name is John. Instead of preparing the road for little Harold, I think I'm safe there. Prepare little Harold for the road. The one I wanted to spend most time on is that most important relationship that we have in life, and that's the one we have usually with our spouse. And I bring it up to the 2020s, even though I've never seen the show. This is just us. I added a word in there for copyright infringement purposes or anything. We form this unique relationship in life, and we do so with the hopes, society says, I'm going to use a different word, with the expectation that it lasts a lifetime. We do this not because it's easy. We do this because it's good. And we do this because it's holy. And we do this because it's a blessing. I go back when I was 19 years old and on the campus of Olivet and starting this world, I was looking for cute. I was looking for cute, and I was looking for other things which will not go mentioned here in this sermon. And good stock portfolio. Get your minds out of the... And what I didn't realize at the time is I was choosing, and I should have realized, I was choosing the mother of my children. I was choosing the one who would care for the family. I was choosing the one who would keep the home. I was choosing the one who would tell the doctor when to pull my plug. I'm right there. And some of you think that might come sooner than I think it will. I can say I chose well. I chose very well. I think we need to get to the point where we choose in this most important relationship of life, we choose our responses not to react to what is happening now when the pressure comes up and we're frustrated with things. It's so easy to say that harsh word. It's so easy to react to that other person, this most important person. Instead of choosing your words to shape what will be. There is so much that gets in the way of this relationship. Now, this is where I'm going to say some uncomfortable things. So just hang in here with me. All right? I say this not because I want to, and I'm not. I don't want to wag my finger at anybody. That's not what this is about. I don't want to sit here and say, look what I figured out, because I'm still figuring out a bunch of stuff. I'd like to think I'm a little better husband than I was 35 years ago. I think I am, but I'm probably not as good as probably I should be, and I'll allow my wife 10 minutes for rebuttal right there. But rather to just extend a hand to lift us up to a different plane, a different level that will ultimately be a greater blessing in life. There is much that gets in the way of this relationship today. The first thing is this expectation. Gee, I hope it all works out. Gee, maybe. But if it doesn't, we kind of wander in instead of being uniquely intentional here. I was talking with a few people this week about different situations. And the one thing is, I was very much aware 35 years ago that that day, December 20th, 1986, I was walking down the aisle and I was committing my life to my wife. I don't know we had everything else figured out, but we'd figured out together. Because the one thing that was most important was her, not everything else. It was her. I didn't know what all life had for us, but it seemed like richer for poor, sickness and in health, better for worse. That covers it. And there's some things that pull us away today. Let me just mention a couple. I don't talk about this a lot because I don't want to, but we live in a culture that is sick. We live in a culture that is twisted, that does everything they can to pull people away and destroy. So let me just mention one or two. I was doing the research this week. Over 40 million Americans, mostly men, but women as well, are regular visitors to pornography websites. The average visit lasts about 7 minutes. The annual revenue of the industry of pornography is more than the NFL, the NBA, and Major League Baseball combined. Let that run through your head a little bit. 47% of families, that's almost half, in the United States reported that pornography is a problem in their home. And with regular pornography use, it increases marital infidelity rate by more than 300%. Those aren't my stats, by the way. We have now devolved, and I use that word purposely, devolved so much that the average age that a child is first exposed to pornography is 11. 90% will see by the time they're 14. Just think that through. 56% of divorces involve one party having what's labeled an obsessive interest in it. Here's the sadness. Here's why I say this. I'm not interested in wagging anybody's fingers. Wagging my finger at anybody. We live in this twisted culture that has thrown stuff at people. And sometimes people get trapped, ensnared, and I use that word purposely because people involved report drastically lower levels of happiness, drastically lower levels of marital satisfaction, higher levels of stress, higher levels of anxiety, and higher levels of depression. Sounds like a great thing to be a part of. Those who use it or regularly use it lose interest and engage in less sexually satisfying marriage and less experiences. It leaves the partner often feeling threatened and inadequate. And both the user and the partner report a great decrease, not only in the relationship, but in emotional closeness and sexual satisfaction across the board. I'm just telling you, there is a better way out there. It is a kind of a fantasy world that exists out there, and the thing that will make a difference in your life is not that world, but the person that's right there in front of you. Right there. And we need to focus energy and attention and love on the person that's right there in front of us. Now I'm going to go to the other end. I see some other things, and I see a lot of it. I see it in stores. I see it at school events. I see it in a lot of things. There's a thing called contempt. And I see it openly expressed sometimes by everybody. Sorry, in my world, I might be wrong. I see it expressed often openly, a little more by women than men. Though by both. Sometimes big groups of people get together. All the friends get together. And while they're together, they're complaining about their spouse. He doesn't pick up his socks. He doesn't do this. She doesn't do that. Can I tell you something? If you're out with friends and every other friend is complaining about their spouse, don't you dare. Something I read about you and your spouse being one. The danger, I call it the danger of the eye roll. You've seen this. Someone standing behind their spouse, beside their spouse, the spouse talking, and you've seen that. Don't ever do that. If you're going to have a stroke, unless you do the eye roll, go run in a closed room somewhere and shut the door where no one sees you and do your exaggerated eye roll, get it out of your system, and then walk back out. You see, there's a fantasy world that exists on the other side as well. Oh, and it's fed by a whole other different thing. I'm not equating what I've just talked about at all. There's something about if you go home to a little town in Vermont that has a Christmas festival, you'll meet someone who's the son of a hardware store owner, but yet is the prince of a country in Europe, and there'll be a kiss under the mistletoe, and all life will be better and everything. That's just as big of a fantasy world. Focus on the person that's right there in front of you. I did forget the dog. We live in so many false worlds. On the one side, we live in the phony world of lighting and airbrushing and photoshopped images and false portrayals of life. On another side, we live in the fake world of exaggerated romantic notions and hold people up to standards that are impossible to keep. And I'm not against romance, I'm not against flowers, but sometimes when you're standing in a flooded basement, sometimes you're in a hospital room, sometimes you're standing there because the kids have had strep throat for the last 2 weeks, all the stuff that can happen. We need to live in the real world that's always right here in front of us. That person that's right there in front of us. Love the person that's in front of you. Love the friend that's right beside you. Love the child that's making you pull your hair out right that week. Love the spouse, even as you look behind him and you see socks on the floor. There are many areas of life, and got to tell you, none of them are easy. It's better to make intentional choices than to just bounce unthinkingly through life, which is where most of our culture lives right now. Bounce unthinkingly through things. Just careen from decision to decision, driven by emotion and the words of bad advice from friends. Dealing with friends can be difficult, but living a life that is increasingly alone and isolated is also very, very hard. So choose your hard wisely. Being a parent is richly rewarding, but it's also very, very tough. You open up your heart to so much potential joy, and you also open up your heart to potential hurt. It's hard to make decisions today based on long-term goals. It's also hard to have the consequences of strained relationships with your kids. So choose your hard. They say marriage is hard, but we neglect how much easier a loving parent can make life. It is hard to live in relationship with another. It is also hard to get to a point in life, look around, and see that there's no one to share life with. It's hard sometimes in the difficult conversations. There's also the bittersweet joy of someday one spouse ushering the other spouse into eternity. So choose your heart. Let me just say one thing. I meant to mention it earlier. I'm not up here to wag a finger at anybody. That is not the spirit of this. But to lift you up into a better place. A place of deeper relationships and more love. And a place that's not burdened with other stuff. So if there's anything, one of the things I think we need in life is an accountability partner. And if there's anything that you want an accountability partner with and you don't know where else, I'll be that. You can text me, send me your email. We'll do it by email, whatever. We can be accountable. I want to lift everybody up to a good plane. And away from the things that so easily tear apart life. I can't remember the date. My first date with my wife was Friday night. It was in 1983. It was in September, like the third week of September. And then our second date was Saturday night. And our third date was Sunday night. It wasn't really a date. I wandered over her dorm. We sat in the lounge of her dorm, McLean dorm, for about 5 hours. And the third date, we talked about family. We talked about how many kids we wanted. We talked about disciplinarian. We talked about saving versus spending. We talked about all these hard issues. That the third date, yes, we're weird. And while at the end of the third date, I couldn't have told you definitively she was the one, I knew she had the boxes checked. On the could be the one. There's such a blessing that happens in life if our relationships are good. They don't happen automatically. There's difficult spots along the way. They're hard, but it's hard to see them ruined. Choose your heart.